Today we are going from beginner to advanced topics within Flashpoint Campaigns Southern Storm. We're going to level up. We're going to talk about the SOP manager and what all of these actually mean. So we have scope, stance, combat, movement, transports, and recovery. The SOP manager is really going to level up your gameplay. It's going to allow you to play in a more dynamic fashion and kind of have a bit more of an immersive and realistic time. So let's close this. The first one we're going to talk about is scope. Scope is relatively simple. The scope sets which orders the settings are applied to, right? That's very basic. So if we were to map out just like 3 orders for this unit real quick and hit commit, give it a little screen, we can actually go into the SOP manager and change what each of the settings are for each one of these orders. So what I mean by that is we'll select order 2 right here, the 12-18-1406 one. And we can change its tactical initiative, we can change its acceptable losses, and we can actually apply that to this unit, and it's only going to change those settings on movement order 2. So we're kind of having, if we're having a relatively like tactical or dynamic advance, as you see this map is absolutely massive, then we're like this movement's only around like 1,500 meters. But if we were to have like a large mechanized force or this entire like section to move into this area, or just be a bit more aggressive, then we would want to change the scope for each one of these orders. So we could basically just say, if we click on this movement order 1 right here, we say move by roads, we give it a generous amount of tactical initiative, which I'll cover here in a moment. And I'll just say minimal losses at this point in time, and fire discipline, we don't really need to have it that far out. Short range. And we just apply to this unit, and basically it kind of just keeps that unit like its orders tight. It's not going to engage anything it's not supposed to engage. But as we move up to order 3, we can kind of let it loose a little bit. We can extend its maximum range out to, or even its like screen at this hex, we can extend it out to the maximum range. We can say, no, we don't want you to have any tactical initiative. You need to do what you're told, when you're told to do it, and how to do it. And then I want my passengers, I want you to hide nearby and not really support the passengers, and then seek concealment. That's basically what scope means, is we can kind of add a bit more customization to our orders. It takes a bit more time, but it's going to evolve your gameplay. It's going to evolve the game. It's going to be a lot more fun. So if we delete all of these waypoints, especially on the bigger maps, this is a relatively close map while there is a large amount of forces on here. I mean, this battle's taking place between like 1,500 and like maybe like 10,000 meters, and we're up on a hillside, so we don't have a lot of movement, and so there's not really a reason to have that kind of scope set for each of our orders. So stance, let's move on to tactical initiative. That's one that always confused me. I never really understood what it was for, but it's relatively simple once you dive into it. So if you this is the likelihood of a unit deviating from its orders or pathing based on the current situation, whether it comes under fire, outnumber, or etc. So there's a bit of AI. There are several settings: none, slight, moderate, generous. It doesn't really give a breakdown of which each of those mean, at least not in this area. I would like a bit more of a breakdown other than just some words. But if we say no tactical initiative, that basically means it is sticking to its plan. That means we're kind of just telling it, move here, do this, don't deviate. That means you fire at your maximum range, you support your troops, or you support your squads that are with you, and you resupply and have readiness. And if you get overwhelmed, overwhelmed or outnumbered, you don't break contact and you just stay there. So we could just say screen at this hex or whatever we wanted to do. And if we really wanted to, we say none, and we just drive this up, do or die. Maximum range, apply to this unit, and basically this unit does not deviate from this position, and it stays here until we give it orders otherwise. It's really, really simple, really basic. It's just something I finally had time to dig into. Now, if we go down to acceptable losses, I mean, so these two work in unison. It's really like hammered out in the manual. I don't know exactly how they work in unison, but obviously if you give it a generous amount of tactical initiative and you set the acceptable losses to do or die, then the AI more than likely is just going to break contact and try and survive. So you have two conflicting situations going on right there. You're telling the AI to kind of do whatever it wants when it gets outnumbered, But at the same time, you're saying, hey, your acceptable losses are do or die. So if you want to break contact or take a bunch of losses and break contact, or sorry, I'm stumbling really hard right now. It's basically like you take a lot of losses and you don't break contact. But basically what we're telling it to do is break contact when you want and don't worry about those losses. Same thing like this. If we say take minimal losses and it takes one loss, it doesn't really like run it up. It's not going to say, hey, we're going to lose 1 or 2 units. It's just going to use that tactical initiative to do what it wants. It's a really interesting feature. I need to experiment with it a little bit to kind of hammer out like the finer details of it. And then obviously acceptable losses, which is where we're at right now. So preferred standoff range, the number of 500-meter hexes you wish your unit to be distant from the enemy. So a lot of this works in unison. So if we say, you have a generous amount of tactical initiative, but then you say, I prefer for you to stay at 4 standoff range. That means once a tank or enemy combatant enters that range, it's going to break contact. And I guess that could say, hey, I want you to stick to this situation. Break contact immediately at 1,000 meters or 2,000 meters, which is 4 hexes. So that's going to take a little bit of experimenting with to see which one's worse. If we say generous, is he going to stay when it gets into that 4,000 or that 2,000 meter range? And if we say none, he's obviously going to stay. You can't move. You stay at 400, 2,000 meters. And if someone enters that, then you move back. It's interesting. It's a really interesting concept. I'm not quite sure about it yet. Direct fire discipline is what it is, exactly what it says. Refuse to fire, which is good for recon units. Hold fire until fired upon. This is only direct fire, which sucks because I really wish there was an indirect fire option. That's like the one bit of feedback I'll always give for this game is it just seems like you get destroyed by artillery. And I really wish there was an indirect fire option. Obviously, acceptable losses right here. You can set it to minimal. But I'd rather them move if they come under direct fire, not just take a loss. Because you never know what you're going to get when you come under indirect fire. You could just get wiped off the map, with a neutralizing blast. So this is direct fire. So direct fire means you're directly engaged. You're a tank sees you. They shoot at you. They're firing at your Bradley. T-72 engages a Bradley. And what's it going to do? So we can refuse to fire, hold fire until fire upon, fire point blank, so 500 meters, which means 0 to 500, short range 1/3, medium 2/3, maximum range. So if we were to really hammer that out or hammer that home, we would go into our unit dashboard or a subunit dashboard. And we would really figure out what our ranges are. Obviously, this isn't the most ideal. So let's grab a tank real quick. Subunit inspector. This is really when that direct fire discipline is going to come into play. So you have a tank here with a 5,000 meter range. That's when you're going to have your maximum, your point blanks, your 2/3. So as you're planning out your operation or your tactics, what you want to do, it's important to understand the weapon system you're setting those SOPs to. So let's say we have this M1 Abrams and we're kind of in a defensive area and our range is 5,000 meters. So basically 500, 500, 2, 3, basically all the way down to this town right here. If we're being engaged and we want to set our SOPs, our direct fire discipline, we can say maximum range, or we can say hold fire until fire upon. So you can actually change that for your certain orders. So if you were to have 4 and 5, we could set a time delay. He stops at order 1, sits there for 5 minutes. Under our scope, we'll have him at this spot. He refuses to fire or he holds fire until fired upon. And then when he moves into his more advantageous position, he fires from a maximum range. So if we were to demonstrate that real quick, we would do just an assault up to this point, and we have two points right here, a 1 and a 2. This don't make that much sense. So if we were to come to point 1, we right click, we go to the SOP manager, we go at point 1, I want you to have none, no tactical initiative, actually generous, because I want you to be able to bound from that position. Here, I don't want you to fire until fired upon. And I want to apply to this unit only. At point 2, I want to change it, fire at maximum range. I want you to have no tactical initiative because I want you in this position and I want you shooting. And then I want you to relocate after each, we'll talk about that later, after each fire mission, which is a bit tricky, but we're going to say after receiving any fire. So I guess we can say indirect, but I'll talk about it in a minute. Close, apply to this unit. So what's going to happen, he's going to move into this position. He's not going to fire until he's fired upon. When he moves into position 2, he's going to engage at units at maximum range, and he will bound from this position the second he comes under any sort of fire. All right, so let's go back into the SOP manager. Let's delete these. We're working our way down. I apologize, guys. It's going to be a good time. Don't worry. So here we have relocate when. Relocate when is very, very self-explanatory. You have after each fire mission. So you're really going to be microing a unit. You can say that's for your tanks. Remember that like the tanks, they don't hit every shot all the time. So if you are engaging anyone, you need to make sure you're in a good advantageous position. So we'd start on this hillside, then we'd say move over here, move over here, move over here. Hopefully that's how it would work, and we would kind of just bound around with our tanks. After each fire mission, after all fire missions, I don't fully understand that. I guess you're gonna I want more explanation on that. I'm gonna look that up. While enemy is spotted, no, that would be for your recon units, but you don't really want to break contact with your recon units. It truly depends on what you want to do. Maybe with your artillery units, you want to break contact when the enemy's spotted, especially when they're in your back line. After receiving any fire, so I have like gripes with this one. I would rather it be indirect fire, because there's times you want to be in the fight, like fighting someone directly, and then artillery starts to fall, and that's when you want to break contact. Whereas after receiving any fire, that means you're going to be engaging someone in direct fire, and the second they return fire to you, you're going to immediately break contact. So I just want an indirect fire one. It just for me. After receiving direct fire, obviously. So if you come under artillery fire, you're going to sit there, but the second T-72 puts a round down range towards you, you're going to break contact. After taking any losses, remember these kind of need to be set up like to make a bit of sense. And then after taking direct fire losses, and then never break contact. So remember, your tactical initiative is basically your governing body. So we say never break contact and give this unit a generous amount of tactical initiative, and then say minimal losses. We have very conflicting information here. So if I remember, it's going to run basically like how the code is going to run. It's going to run like down. So we're going to say, hey, you have a lot of tactical initiative. Oh, you have minimal losses. And then it's going to get down here. It's like, oh, relocate never. That doesn't make very much sense, and he's going to break contact. Or relocate after taking any losses. Well, yeah. And we say do or die, and we kind of just set up conflicting information here. It's really going to confuse the system and confuse your units. So we say tactical initiative none, do or die, acceptable losses. Like you can take all the losses you want, and you say relocate after taking any losses. The computer's just going to get confused. Provide direct fire support. This is mainly for artillery, or it's only for artillery. There's a lot to be discussed in that one. I believe I can make an entire video on it. So before I talk too much about it, I want to research that one a little bit. Movement preferences is basically what it means. So if we were to click on this APC right here and say concealment, apply to this unit, hit close, right click and give it just a move order randomly around the map, commit, screen. It's basically going to do its best to, if we give it like a road order, to move concealed. See? Unless we purposely kind of drag it onto the road, it's going to always try to go off the road. You know what I mean? And it's going to see, I know it's like hard to see, but if we were to just give this thing a road, typically it would just path straight to that road. It's just going to use concealment. That's all. Whereas if we go into SOP manager and we say, oh, I had roads selected. Roads apply to this unit. Close. Move hasty. We just click a road. Gonna follow the road just like that. And then if we go back to concealment, apply to this unit, close, move hasty. Just generally going to avoid roads. But I mean, you obviously can put them on the roads. It's just going to be a bit different. See how he goes through this town instead of prioritizing the road? That's all. Relatively extremely straightforward. Then if we right click the unit, go back to the SOP manager, you do have avoid nuclear, biological, and chemical. I mean, all that means is he's going to avoid nuclear, biological, and chemical. That stuff's really deadly within the game, so you always want to avoid that. Honestly, I don't really see a reason to drive through gas because then your units kind of lose a lot of readiness and then they will actually take casualties in the meantime. Even if they're like nuclear, biologically, or chemically safe, they still take casualties. Minefield contact, I have an entire video on minefields. It's like one of my most researched videos and it's like my least watched. Watch that video because it like same thing. Your tactical initiative, your acceptable losses, your relocate win, like this all runs like in a line. So if we're generous, we say acceptable losses moderate, but then we come down here and we say relocate after taking any losses, but down here we say ignore and run. These are conflicting. So we're telling the computer to relocate after taking any losses, but then once we run into this minefield and we take casualties, it's not going to breach the minefield. It's going to stop right here and bound out of the minefield and not continue that advance across it. So all of this needs to make sense to the game and to the code, the AI. It all needs to make sense. All right, let's go down. Transport passengers disembark at range. There are two options for this. The first option is setting for 500 meters from the final waypoint. This is useful for assault or recon efforts. Personally, unless your assault has like a javelin or something, I don't really see that being super beneficial because a lot of the AT4s in this game have a range of 240 meters, which basically means you're fighting within one hex. Maybe a little bit outside of it. This hex is 500 meters, so if the range is 80 meters, he's not going to shoot outside of the hex. At least when I've tested it. And then once transporting armored personnel carriers or infantry fighting vehicles disembark their troops, this setting tells them what the unit should do. For APCs, the better choice is to hide nearby, seek cover, do not engage the enemy. I mean, they generally only have like a 50 cal gun. So, or like a 7.62, so they're not going to do much of anything. And then the support passengers, they seek good cover but engage the enemy with onboard weapon systems to improve firepower, but risk losing transports to enemy fire. It's truly up to you what you want to do. The Bradleys, like if we were to bring up one of these Bradleys and take a look at the subunit inspector, this is a very powerful system. It has a TOW anti-tank guided weapon system. It has basically a medium rifle squad, M16 rifle with not much on it, but that's basically all it has. You kind of want that unit to support. You don't really want it to hide nearby, especially with those TOW weapons, the TOW weapon system. But yeah, it's up to you. It's up to you how you want to configure your SOPs. Don't let me tell you what to do. But obviously that would be an assault, so you would want them to support nearby. And then recovery, one of the final steps. Recovery is relatively simple. You have resupply, you have readiness. I'm just going to read this verbatim. The resupply, the option lets you set the limit for a unit's ammo level, and when it hits the trigger, level or below, the unit will go into resupply until it either recovers to a set percentage over time or recovers for a set amount of time, which restores the amount of ammo. Yep. So if you say resupply at 25%, recover to 100%, or recover for a number of minutes. We can say just recover down here for 50. So we trigger at 25% and we recover to 50. So it goes non-operational at 25 and it becomes operational at 50%. Or we could select the minutes. 2. Basically give it 2 minutes of recovery. Readiness, basically the same. This option lets you set a limit for the unit's readiness level, and when it hits the trigger level or below, the units will go into resupply until it either recovers to a set percentage over time for a set amount of time, which restores an amount of readiness based on the unit's set time. So this could be really useful later on if you really want to get in depth in some of the larger scenarios. So readiness, we want this to trigger. 25 is really low, but we'd say like 50. And then we say recover to a percentage of 75. And that would be applying to this Bradley. And that is the SOP manager. Make sure you follow the live streams where we stream Flashpoint Campaigns Southern Storm, Combat Mission, and a bunch of upcoming games. And you will be able to catch the next episode of this sometime soon because I need to finish this campaign. All right, guys, that's all. Peace.